You know, it's not often you hear something like this come out of the mouth of a Western political leader. And that's what made it so powerful. When Gavin Newsom said that Islam's values of discipline, unity, and moral clarity could actually help reshape the moral foundation of the West, it wasn't just a political comment, it was a cultural jolt. People didn't know how to react. Some were stunned, some angry, and others quietly nodding because deep down they knew he was touching a nerve. He wasn't talking about religion as a political system. He was talking about values, about the strength of character and community that holds societies together when everything else falls apart. The West has achieved incredible technological progress, yes, but it's come at a cost. Loneliness, greed, spiritual emptiness. What he was saying, in essence, was that maybe the answer isn't another app or policy or economic plan, but rediscovering what it means to live with purpose, discipline, and compassion. Values Islam has preserved for centuries. And it's not about conversion, it's about reflection. It's about looking at a civilization that still believes in something larger than itself and asking, what happened to us? That's what shocked people. Not that he mentioned Islam, but that he dared to suggest the West might learn from it. Because in a world driven by ego and excess, saying that moral clarity could come from faith, especially one so misunderstood, felt revolutionary. It was a reminder that progress without principles is just motion without direction. And maybe, just maybe, that's why his words didn't just make headlines. They made people think. The reaction to that statement was wild. You could almost feel the media freeze for a second, like they didn't know which button to press. They weren't outraged because it was offensive. No, they were stunned because it was true, and that's what scared them. You see, we live in this era where truth has become uncomfortable, where people would rather argue about who's right than admit what's real. When Gavin Newsom said that Islam's values of discipline and moral clarity could guide the West, it hit a nerve, because deep down everyone knows the West has lost its moral compass. We have billionaires shooting rockets into space while people can't afford healthcare or rent, and somehow we still call that success. The media doesn't want to talk about that kind of truth. They'd rather twist the story, distract, keep people divided. But this time, the message cut through the noise. It wasn't about religion. It was about responsibility, about the fact that we've replaced integrity with image and compassion with consumption. And when someone in power dares to say that maybe another civilization, another system of values has something we've lost, that's when people panic. Because admitting that Islam's principles of unity, justice, and accountability might actually work challenges everything our society pretends to stand for. The truth makes people uncomfortable when it threatens their comfort zones. And so the talking heads on television didn't know what to do. They couldn't attack him without sounding intolerant, and they couldn't agree without admitting the system is broken. So they did what they always do. They danced around it. But for a moment, just a moment, you could see it in their faces. That quiet, uneasy realization that the statement wasn't radical at all. It was just honest. You look around today and you can feel it. People are tired, not just physically, but morally tired. The Western world is running on fumes. We've built this massive machine of profit and progress, and it's spinning faster than ever, but nobody's asking where it's going or why we're even on it. Everywhere you look, it's about the next dollar, the next deal, the next dopamine hit. We've convinced ourselves that comfort equals happiness, that consumption equals meaning, and yet people are lonelier, more anxious, more disconnected than ever. Families don't talk anymore, communities are disappearing, and everything sacred has been turned into a brand. That's what I mean by moral fatigue. It's not that people don't care, it's that they've been taught that caring doesn't pay. We've got billion-dollar corporations selling us happiness in subscription plans while the soul of society is running dry. And then someone brings up Islam, not as a religion to convert to, but as a reminder of what it looks like when a culture still believes in moral structure, in discipline, in something greater than self-interest, and suddenly people get uncomfortable because it forces them to face the truth that for all our wealth, we're spiritually bankrupt. We've traded wisdom for convenience, values for comfort, and purpose for entertainment. And it's catching up with us. You can't build a civilization on burnout and greed. You can't sustain a society that no longer knows what it stands for. What Newsom's comment did was rip the bandage off and expose what everyone already feels but refuses to say. that the West is exhausted, not because it's poor or weak, but because it's lost its soul. And until we start searching for it again, all our progress will keep feeling like decay in disguise. You know what really gets me about this whole conversation? It's how people can look right at something so solid, so rooted, and still miss the point. When we talk about Islam's grounded values, family, compassion, respect for elders, accountability, we are not talking about abstract theology. We're talking about the foundation of a functioning society. In the West, we've somehow mistaken freedom for detachment. We've glorified the idea of the self-made man while tearing apart the very fabric that makes us human. Connection, duty, humility. In Islamic cultures, these things still mean something. Family isn't just blood, it's identity. You care for your parents not because it's convenient, but because it's right. You help your neighbor not because there's a tax benefit, but because your conscience demands it. And compassion isn't charity, it's justice. When people in the West hear that, they act like it's some ancient code, but maybe ancient wisdom is exactly what we need in this morally confused age. These grounded values don't make people less modern, they make them more human. And what Newsom was pointing out, and what scared a lot of people, is that maybe we've advanced so far technologically that we've forgotten what it means to be decent. Islam reminds us that strength isn't in control, it's in restraint. That community isn't weakness, it's power. That morality isn't oppression, it's guidance. And that's not a Muslim thing, that's a human truth. The fact that this sounds revolutionary in 2025 tells you how lost we've become. Let's be honest, the economic system we built in the West is morally broken. You've got billionaires adding zeros to their wealth, while working families can't afford basic necessities. That's not a bug in the system, that is the system. And here's where Islam offers something we desperately need to hear, an economy that's tied to ethics. Think about that for a second. An economy not driven by greed, but guided by conscience. The Islamic idea of zakat, giving a portion of your income to help the poor, isn't a suggestion, it's a duty. The prohibition of riba, or interest exploitation, is about fairness, about stopping the rich from preying on the desperate. It's not socialism, it's not capitalism, it's justice. It's a system that says, yes, make money, yes, innovate, yes, build, but don't do it by crushing the people at the bottom. What Newsom said touched on this, that if the West wants to survive morally, it has to learn to balance profit with purpose. Because let's face it, the moral crisis of capitalism isn't just about inequality, it's about indifference. It's about a world where people matter less than Margie. Islam's economic vision demands something better, a moral economy where wealth circulates, not accumulates. And that's what terrifies the elite. Because if we start linking money to morality, the entire structure of greed begins to collapse. Maybe that's the real reason his statement caused shockwaves. Not because it was religious, but because it was right. Let me tell you something. The world today is drowning in division. Left versus right, rich versus poor, race, religion, gender, it's endless. We've made conflict our currency. And yet Islam, at its core, teaches something that feels almost radical now, unity. The idea that people, regardless of background, are part of one ummah, one community. That your worth isn't determined by wealth, color, or status, but by your character. Imagine if we lived that way here. Imagine if our politics, our neighborhoods, our workplaces were built on solidarity instead of suspicion. You know why this message scares people in power? Because unity is dangerous. It dismantles control. A united people can't be manipulated, can't be divided by hate or distraction. Islam's concept of togetherness, praying side by side, rich and poor, shoulder to shoulder, is a vision of equality the modern world has forgotten. And when Newsom mentioned that spirit, it rattled people because it exposed how hollow our sense of community has become. We claim to be inclusive, but our systems are built to separate. Unity isn't a slogan, it's a discipline. It takes empathy, humility, and courage, and that's exactly what our world is running out of. In the West, faith has become a fashion statement. Something you put on when it's convenient, then drop when it's uncomfortable. But in Islam, faith isn't seasonal. It's consistent. It's lived. It's structure, routine, clarity. 5 prayers a day. A reminder that life isn't chaos, that discipline brings peace. Fasting during Ramadan, not punishment, but empathy, a reset of the soul. In a society that glorifies instant gratification, that kind of consistency feels alien. But maybe that's what we're missing. A rhythm that connects us to something higher, steadier than trends or politics. The Western mind confuses freedom with inconsistency, but real freedom comes from discipline, from knowing who you are and what you stand for. When Gavin Newsom highlighted that, he wasn't preaching, he was observing. He was pointing out that while the West drifts between ideologies, Islam has kept its moral compass steady for centuries, and in a time of spiritual confusion, that stability looks like strength. Maybe we don't need more innovation. Maybe we need more integrity. The moment he said it, you could almost hear the headlines being typed, not to explore the truth, but to contain it. The media doesn't do reflection anymore, it does reaction. And when someone like Gavin Newsom praises Islamic values, it's too complex for the narrative machine. So they twist it, they soften it, or they ignore it altogether. Why? Because honesty doesn't fit in a 10-second clip. The media has built an economy on outrage, not understanding. They don't want conversations about morality. They want arguments about identity. And Islam, with its nuance, its depth, its history, doesn't fit neatly into that box. So instead of examining what he meant, that discipline, community, and purpose might help heal Western decay, they turned it into controversy. But here's the thing. People are smarter than they think. They're hungry for something real, something the headlines can't spin. The more the media tries to silence these ideas, the louder they echo in the minds of those who feel the emptiness. Maybe that's why this shook the establishment, not because it was dangerous, but because it was honest. The moment that clip hit the internet, you could feel the divide. Millions of people arguing, reacting, defending, attacking. Some said it was brave, others said it was naive. But underneath all, the noise was something remarkable. Engagement. People were thinking, feeling, talking about morality again. That's rare. For once, the conversation wasn't about celebrity scandals or partisan fights. It was about meaning. The truth is, this debate exposed how starved people are for real dialogue. We live in a culture where everything's performative. But when someone dares to speak from a place of conscience, it cuts through the noise. The divide wasn't about Islam, it was about honesty. Half the world felt threatened because they knew he was right. The other half felt hope because someone finally said it. And that's the beauty of truth. It doesn't unite people instantly, it forces them to confront themselves. Maybe that's what this was, a collective mirror moment for the West. At the end of it all, this wasn't about converting anyone or winning a debate. It was about understanding. It was about two worlds looking at each other and realizing they're not so different after all. The West is exhausted from chasing material progress without moral direction. Islam, for centuries, has held on to values that anchor the soul. The point wasn't religion versus reason. It was about rebuilding meaning in a time of moral collapse. When Gavin Newsom made that statement, he wasn't promoting a faith. He was reminding us that faith in something is necessary to stay human. And maybe that's why it shocked so many. Because truth, when it's spoken plainly, sounds revolutionary in a world built on denial.